Hey guys, it's Maltha here once again with the Arc and Tendrils Totems Hierophant dual Shimmeron character, and I've got a bunch of clips for you guys of the actual gameplay, mostly of Arc Totems, some single target of Tendies, Lightning Tendi Totems, and then some end game boss fights, let's say the tier 16 Guardians, a little bit of Shaper and some Uber Itziri for you, because basically I'm here to sing the praises of this character. It was amazing to play, let's just be honest. At level 92 now, it took me something like 24 hours to get there. I had an absolute blast. It was the easiest character I've had playing, and some of the most enjoyable aesthetics of just chain and just comfort of being able to place your totems super fast with the large amount of placement speed you get now, watching the Arc Totems go to town, and as you can see in a map like this with double beyond, Arc Totems just absolutely shred things. It's actually kind of disgusting how good this clear can get and how safe it can be if you want to play it that way. All of this and that you're going to see in these clips is on a 5 link as well, so the barrier for entry on this build is actually pretty damn low. You really just need 2 Shimmerons, and then sure, if you can refine some gear here or there, it'll be lovely. But ultimately, you don't really need much more than the 2 Shimmerons, and maybe a Wise Oak, I suppose. But for the most part, the hard carry here is 2 Shimmeron wands paired with the Hierophant Ascendancy, which seems to be really strong. You can slap just about any sort of spell that is effective, and then it will become more effective since you now have 4 totems. So quite commonly and quite popularly, Glacial Cascade totems are something that people play, and that's probably what you'd do if you want to start the league out. Something more like a Glacial Cascade or a Dark Pact totem, because Arc Totems do take a few links and a few levels to really start to feel good. Not until you have a lot of the chains and the great good links and the passives and all that, you're not really going to get too much mileage out of Arc Totems, whereas Glacial Cascade, it's pretty much as good as it gets right from the very get-go, and it should be able to farm everything all the way through to the absolute end game content, and even do it more effectively than this build. But I think the map clear is more enjoyable on this, and I just prefer the lightning skilled themes in, you know, my own personal preference for the most part in this game at the moment, even if they're not quite as good. So Arc Totems for clear were absolutely magical. I just did not mind running around placing totems and getting all of this damage happening, especially with the large amount of placement speed that Hierophant now gets, as well as through the passive tree. And I even used a bit of single target there, as you can see, for Arc, but once we wanted to really get down to business, I just swapped in a Lightning Tendrils, and that's all it took. Just one quick swap of Arc into Lightning Tendrils, and this 5 link DPS is some of the dirtiest I've ever seen. Considering it's extremely safe, you just stand back, you don't really have to stand there and channel yourself, you just plain get your totems down, run around in circles, and feel incredibly amazing shredding bosses. Now on a 5 link, that's really quite impressive, and I did end up clearing everything up to Uber Elder on a 5 link completely comfortably, including Uber Itziri, which I did multiple runs of, and I did multiple tier 16 Guardian runs, all deathless. Everything can be absolutely deathless with this build in this single target. This will be the examples of the Uber Itziri clips, and with a 6th link, I think it should be just incredibly easy, efficient, and deathless. With a 5 link, it might get a little hairy at times, but I did not need to resort to the resurrect in town button even once. So it was a very smooth experience throughout the end game, and I honestly swapped between Tendrils and Arc quite a bit throughout these end game encounters, because the Tendrils, without a lot of area, they really do not have a vast amount of range, and I've spec'd into absolutely no area, so you can see that they have pretty low range, and it can be hard to hit things at times. So especially if you get into a 6th link territory, you have Conk Effect. At that point, it really does start to feel a bit small on area, and you really have to precision place your totems, and that gets a little bit awkward. Now you can see that my health pool there is about 4,500, got about 2,000 mana. That's with a more effective mind over matter, thanks to the Hierophant node. So you might be, laughing, oh, only 4,000 life. it's actually quite a decent life pool. 4,500 life, I do have some mitigation, and then Mind Over Matter with some decent regen. And especially being a totem-based character, your totems take a lot of the dicking more times than you will. And this here is a tier 16 Chimera, and he's got some pretty nasty mods on this one. I think he's got like monster damage, crit, and even fire or cold damage or some shit. But totems, for the most part, just clean that shit up very nicely, even on a 5-link. I think at this point though, for some of these boss fights, at my damage level, Arc is just much more efficient. So once you hit a certain level of damage on the character, Arc becomes much more preferable in every encounter because it's a lot more ranged and it cleans things up a lot better with the chaining. So at 6-link level, I think Arc is pretty much the way to go everywhere. At 5-link level, you may be tempted to slap some tendies in and get some serious boss single target happening every now and again. But spoiler alert, I did end up killing Uber Elder, and it was with Arc Totems. I did end up trying various things, tendrils, swapping from tendrils to Arc quite profusely. Ultimately, it ended up just being a 6-link and Arc that did it, and it felt the smoothest of the choices that I made. Never actually tried Stormcall in the end for actual bosses, only for a Shaper run, and Stormcall, it just did not feel that good to me. It was maybe comparable to Tendrils and maybe just a bit more ranged, so ultimately, if you have the Helm enchant, maybe Stormcall is something you could or should do, but I enjoyed Arc, and I thought Arc, especially on the 6-link, was good enough to do everything, and that it will be proven in the next video that I put up of my Uber Elder kill with Arc, and yeah, it was probably my least expected outcome for the league. If you asked me before the league started, with Uber Elder coming, how do you think you're going to kill it? Do you think you're going to kill it? I would not have said, it's going to take me a month and it's going to be Arc Totems. That certainly would not have been my prediction. But you can see with the Minotaur here that it's a fairly large running around and just placing totems playstyle, because Minotaur is a total douchebag with his mechanics. He just keeps burrowing if you're not in his range. We certainly don't want to face tank, and he doesn't really have too much inclination to attack my totems. So it's pretty safe, but yeah, it's not the most fun kill out there. And then Hydra, the totems, you can really see that they're going to be dying occasionally, and you certainly see that in the Uber Elder run, where totems just end up dying to some of the bigger hits. So the continuous run around and place totems playstyle, if you're not really a fan of that, it may get a bit annoying, but you get used to it, especially with the placement speed, with the mana regen you have, and ultimately it ended up being pretty fun. So they do die to those balls, they do die to some area damage at times, but for the most part it's been completely a joy to actually play totems, and I think they've come a very long way, especially with the Hierophant Ascendancy. And lastly, you can see some serious 5-link Shaper DPS here. Actually, I think this might be 6-link. I don't remember anymore, but yeah, this is Tendies versus Shaper. I think it's probably 6-link at this point, and it steamrolls. The 6th link isn't too important here anyway. 5-link is going to be plenty of damage. And I'm just going to go ahead and give you guys a rundown of the character at this point. So I do have to give you a full rundown of the character as he is at this point. And first of all, let me mention how cool are these little power and endurance charges that look like little floating tentacles. That is happening entirely because of just wearing Shimmer on. Turns your power and endurance charges into little floating tentacles. That's pretty damn cool as a little micro. So besides that, let's get straight into it. It is a now level 92 totem character. It is Hierophant. Plenty of the good nodes, so extra totem there, grabbing the mana and some additional Mind Over Matter action, and then some extra quality of life for the totems. Absolutely huge, having the ability to just charge up your power charges before starting a fight, so you can always go in basically at maximum by just standing there. I just spam my Searing Bond over and over again till I'm at 6 and 3, and then you can run in and maintain indefinitely your power and usually endurance charges too. So that's very quality of life. So Hierophant, pretty much the premier totem character at this point, I'd say. It's hard to pick anything else. It just has way too much quality of life. And the character is built around 2 Shimmerons. Now, as I've mentioned, you do not take any of the degen if you yourself do not crit. So the Totems critting does not incur your degen at all. However, when you Lightning Warp or you Flame Dash, and if you crit, you certainly do incur that degen. So you got to be careful when you're warping around or when you're flame dashing. If you are near a monster and you crit, it is absolutely going to start wrecking you. At my stage of gear, it doesn't do too much. It'll probably take me down like 30% life and maybe like 30% mana because of my regen and my resist and all that. But you can see here that Lightning Warp currently has 57 crit without Diamond Flask up, and likewise Flame Dash 63 without Diamond Flask up. So if you're near anything, you're almost always going to be critting, so be very careful of that. However, if you weapon swap when you actually have crit, then you're not going to take that degen for the 4 seconds that it lasts. So that is a quick little weapon swap alternative. Now the rest of the gear, I probably have covered just about everything in the previous video. Did manage to craft this guy just by chaos spamming, so grab an eye level 86. 4, something like that, Saintly Chainmail, go to town with some chaos or some greeds, try and get some life and then some spell crit, or just a plus additional active gem, that works too. And then we managed to 6-link it, but for the purpose of the entire video, I was running a 5-link, and up till level 92 I was running a 5-link. I only started trying to 6-link when I went into my 3rd Uber Elder attempt, and yeah, managed to get the 6-link and then kill Uber Elder. Though I'm not entirely sure it's 100% necessary for Uber Elder, the faster casting as my 6th link ended up helping quite a bit. It's just not a huge damage increase, it's something like 20%, as opposed to, let's say, a conk effect for some other gems like Tendrils, which is a 50% increase. So the 6th link I don't think completely crucial, but it is fairly nice, I'd say, and if you can get it, it's definitely going to help you throughout the long term. But the current arc links, so grabbed an arc level 21 for like 3 chaos a few days ago. Then you go Lightning Pen, you go Spell Totem, Control Destruction. Lastly, I got Ellie Focus, but sometimes I run faster casting. Depends on the map. Ellie Focus is a lot more damage, but sometimes I just want to cast faster and get some shocks going off. But most of the time it is going to be Ellie Focus. And then the 6th link is either faster casting, Minion and Totem Ellie Resist, so that gives a bit of damage as well, or Crit Multi. Those are the choices for Arc. Whereas if you're Tendrils, so you swap in Tendrils purely, you can still keep these links, but for pure single target, this is going to be the biggest setup. This will give you about 550,000 damage per totem with 4 Tendies totems. That means you are rolling 2 million Shaper DPS roughly. And that is a lot of DPS. The Arc totems themselves get up to something like 600, 700k total with all 4 up, which is nothing to sneeze at, but it does have some good Arc potential. So on certain bosses, on certain fights, it's going to be completely crazy to have. So the mana reservation, once again, Wrath attached to your Essence Worm, and then we have a Clarity just chilling in a separate link altogether. Completely unreserved mana otherwise for Mind over Matter, grabbing a few mana nodes over here just to make it a little better. So we don't need too much life since we have so much mana unreserved, and helps with Mind over Matter. And then the rest of the tree is just accommodating to a bit of crit, a few power charges here or there, and the totem nodes that give you the quality of life, the crit, and the damage. So feel free to check out my character, my path of building, and you'll see exactly what I've done. It's a pretty generic spell crit character, I think, still, just building a bit more into totems. The only special jewel I have is a Wrath Watcher's Eye with 13 penetration. Now that's worth roughly the same as a crit one. A damage one is also still pretty good. A lot of Wrath ones are going to be really good, and this one cost me about an Exalt when I first paid for it, so it's not strictly necessary. There can be very many other Watcher's Eye options, but I thought this was the best one since we needed a bit of penetration. Besides that, let's try and get totem damage, crit multi, spell damage, cast speed. It's all good. There's lots of really cheap jewels. Most of these cost like a chaos, since no one values totem damage too highly, especially comboed with lightning and all that. Besides that, tried to get some life and some cast speed wherever I could. So life and cast speed, bit of cast speed on the gloves too, and my golem effect gives me even more cast speed, but he dies quite routinely during the absolute end game encounters. I then got a cast when damage taken, immortal call setup, so cast when damage taken, immortal call, and increased duration, because quite often you will have, here we go, here we go. Quite often you will have at least 1 or 2, maybe even 3 endurance charges, and that does make quite a lot of difference for survivability to have the Immortal Call here. So try and get this setup rolling too. Over here we have Arcane Surge, Conductivity, Increased Duration, Spell Cascade, attached to faster casting as well. So it's 129 cost conductivity. It procs a very high level Arcane Surge, and it's how I get my Arcane Surge rolling, and it's also how I self-curse things, but mostly it's there for Arcane Surge proc since you don't want to use an Orb of Storms. And then lastly, I have a Lightning Warp attached to Swift Affliction, less duration, and faster casting, so that I can sometimes get some fast travel happening in between packs of monsters. You don't want to use it too often to actually escape things or jump into packs, because as I said, you crit, you die, it doesn't feel good with Shimmer on. And then over here, Flame Dash, over here, Searing Bond. Searing Bond is primarily just to get my charges going, but on top of that, it's a totem completely outside of the rule of 4 totems. So I can have 4 totems, but Searing Bond is always going to be an additional totem, and that means you can get an additional 0.5 mana regen and 1% life by having him down. So do try and keep him up whenever you can, if you can. And then over here, I just have a Golem attached to a bunch of crappy minion gems. Overall, I'd say that's all I need to mention. I have balanced my Wise Oak. It's not super important to get that, but it does help. As long as you have at least the lightning penetration going, then that's the best. And yeah, you can copy these flasks if you want, or try out some other ones. But that is basically all I need to say about the character, and you can copy it if you want for totem stuff. Swap in some other totem skills, readjust a little bit based on the skill you chose. Fairly generic, I'd say, template for Hierophant, and they are really pretty damn good and fun to play at the moment for totems, so I do recommend it. If you've been jaded against totems as long as I have, now's a pretty good chance to give them a shot, especially with some Shimmerons, with some shaped weapons. There's going to be a lot of fun to scale your damage, and totem placement speed feels pretty good now, and survivability feels pretty good now. I really did not mind it at all. I actually rather enjoyed it. It was a very nice character. And in the next video, I'll show you how I managed to finally take down Uber Elder with Arc Totems. Hopefully, it's a bit of a good watch. It was fairly clenched doing it. I'm glad I finally did it. And it was very much surprising that this was my first character to do it. In any case, guys, hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.